What happens when a single father who swore he'd never love again meets a woman bold enough to tear down every wall he's built, only to have the entire world try to destroy them before they even have a chance? This is a story about second chances, forbidden connections, and the kind of love that refuses to stay quiet. Stay with me until the end. And if this story moves you, hit that like button and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this reaches. Ethan Walker didn't believe in fate anymore. He believed in alarm clocks, grocery lists, the rigid structure of mornings that started at 5:47 a.m. without deviation. He believed in making lunch for his 5-year-old daughter, checking her backpack twice, kissing her forehead at the kindergarten gate, and pretending he had his life together long enough to get through another day. At 32, he'd already survived the kind of collapse most people spent their whole lives avoiding: a failed marriage, a wife who left without looking back. The brutal realization that love, real, promised, permanent love, could just stop, like a light switch flipped off in the middle of the night. So he didn't do hope anymore. He did routine: work, daughter, sleep, repeat. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't inspiring, but it was safe. And safe was all he had left. The apartment was quiet at this hour. Dawn light filtered through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. Ethan stood at the stove, spatula in hand, watching eggs sizzle in the pan with the kind of focused attention most people reserved for important things. But this was important. This was the routine that held everything together. "Daddy, you forgot Mr. Whiskers." He turned from the stove to find his daughter standing in the doorway holding a stuffed gray cat that had seen better days. Her dark curls were a mess. His fault, probably. He still hadn't mastered the whole hair-brushing thing. Her pink pajamas had a smear of toothpaste on the sleeve, and one sock was pulled higher than the other. "You're right," he said, crouching down so they were eye to eye. "Can't start the day without him." She handed the toy over with the kind of seriousness only a 5-year-old could muster. "He was hiding under my pillow. He said he doesn't like Mondays." "Smart cat." Sophie giggled, and the sound hit him square in the chest the way it always did. That laugh, unguarded, pure, untouched by disappointment or loss, was the only thing in his life that still felt clean. The only thing that hadn't been tainted by everything that had gone wrong. "Go finish your cereal," he said, ruffling her already messy hair. "We leave in 10. She skipped off, humming something she'd probably learned at school, and Ethan turned back to the eggs. He flipped them with practiced precision, plated them, added a piece of toast, arranged it just so. Control, predictability. No surprises. The kitchen was small but meticulously clean. White counters wiped down every night. A calendar on the fridge covered in crayon drawings and appointment reminders. Dentist on the 14th, parent-teacher conference on the 22nd, Sophie's birthday party planning in red marker. A single coffee mug sat in the sink from yesterday because he hadn't gotten around to washing it yet, and the sight of it bothered him more than it should have. This was his world. Narrow, manageable, enough. He poured orange juice into Sophie's favorite cup, the one with the unicorns, and checked the clock. 7:14. Right on schedule. His phone buzzed on the counter. He didn't have to look to know it was work. It was always work. Ever since he'd taken the senior operations role at Bennett and Cross Logistics 6 months ago, his inbox had become a second alarm clock. Relentless, demanding, impossible to ignore. The job paid well enough to afford this apartment in a decent neighborhood with good schools, well enough to mean Sophie didn't have to go without anything important. But it also meant he was always on, always available, always solving someone else's crisis while trying to keep his own life from falling apart. He glanced at the screen. It wasn't an email. It was a calendar notification. Company gala. Tonight, 7 p.m. Attendance mandatory. Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd forgotten. No, he'd ignored it, shoved it to the back of his mind and hoped it would disappear on its own. Social events weren't his thing. Networking, small talk, standing around in a suit while people pretended to care about quarterly projections and supply chain optimization, it all felt like theater. Performance art for people who had energy left over at the end of the day. And Ethan didn't. But the notification didn't care about his feelings. Attendance mandatory. He let out a slow breath, set the phone down, and stared at the eggs cooling on the counter. "Daddy?" His daughter was back, cereal bowl in hand, milk dribbling down her chin. She was looking up at him with those wide brown eyes that could undo him in seconds. Yes, sweetheart? Are you sad? The question caught him completely off guard. No, he said quickly. Too quickly. Just thinking. She tilted her head, unconvinced. Kids had a way of seeing through you that adults had forgotten. You make that face when you're sad. He didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to explain that he wasn't sad. Not exactly. Just tired. Tired of holding everything together. Tired of being strong. Tired of pretending that his life was anything other than a careful balancing act that could collapse at any moment. So he just smiled. Small, tight, probably not convincing, and tapped her nose gently. Finish your cereal. We're going to be late. She nodded, satisfied for now, and wandered back to the table, her feet making soft padding sounds on the floor. Ethan exhaled slowly, grabbed his coffee, and stared out the window at the gray morning stretching beyond the glass. The city was waking up. Cars on the street below, people walking dogs. The world moving forward whether he was ready or not. He wasn't sad. He was just stuck. Trapped in a life that was safe, but not quite living. And he didn't know how to change that. The drive to Sophie's kindergarten took 17 minutes. Ethan knew because he'd timed it, twice. Once during rush hour, once without traffic. He'd mapped out 3 different routes in case of construction or accidents. He'd identified the 2 closest hospitals and memorized the fastest way to get there. This was how he lived now. Contingency plans. Backup strategies. Always prepared for the worst. Sophie sat in the back seat, swinging her legs and singing a song about a spider and a waterspout. She was happy, safe. That was what mattered. Daddy, can Mia come over this weekend? Who's Mia? My friend from school. She has a dog named Biscuit. I'll talk to her mom. Okay. She went back to singing, completely satisfied with that answer. Ethan glanced at her in the rearview mirror and felt the familiar tightness in his chest, love mixed with fear, pride mixed with terror. She was everything to him, the only good thing that had come from his marriage, the only reason he kept going when everything else felt pointless. He pulled up to the kindergarten and parked in the drop-off zone. Sophie unbuckled herself, she'd insisted on learning how, and grabbed her backpack. Have a good day, sweetheart, he said, leaning over to kiss her forehead. You too, Daddy. She jumped out, waved, and ran toward the building where her teacher was waiting. Mrs. Patterson. Mid-50s, kind eyes, the kind of person who actually cared about her job. She waved at Ethan, and he waved back. Then Sophie disappeared inside, and he was alone again. He sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Then he drove to work. Bennett and Cross Logistics occupied the 7th and 8th floors of a glass tower downtown. Modern, efficient, the kind of place that looked impressive in promotional materials but felt cold once you were actually inside. Ethan's office was on the 8th floor, corner space, a window that overlooked the city, a desk that was always covered in paperwork he couldn't quite get ahead of. He dropped his bag, powered on his computer, and stared at his inbox. 87 unread messages. He rubbed his eyes and got to work. The morning passed in a blur of emails, conference calls, and meetings that could have been emails. A shipment delay in Newark, a supplier dispute in Houston, a scheduling conflict that required him to reroute 3 trucks and renegotiate delivery windows with clients who didn't want to hear excuses. By noon, he had a headache. By 2, it had gotten worse. At 3:15, his phone rang. Walker. Ethan, it's Marcus. Marcus Reeves. Sales department. Loud, friendly, impossible to ignore. What's up? You coming to the gala tonight? Do I have a choice? Not really. Davidson sent out a memo. Attendance mandatory for senior staff. Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose. Yeah, I saw. Good. Because I need a drinking buddy, and you're the only person in this building who doesn't make me want to throw myself out a window. Despite everything, Ethan almost smiled. That's a low bar. Take the compliment. Marcus paused. Seriously, though, you okay? You sound like hell. Long day. It's only 3. Exactly, Marcus laughed. See you tonight. Try not to look so miserable. It's bad for morale. He hung up before Ethan could respond. Ethan set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere down the hall, someone was laughing. The sound felt distant, disconnected. He went back to work. Tico. By the time Ethan left the office, it was almost 6. He drove to his sister's place, a townhouse 20 minutes outside the city. Andrea answered the door with flour on her hands and a smile on her face. "You look terrible," she said. "Thanks. I'm serious. When's the last time you slept?" "Last night." "For more than 4 hours?" He didn't answer. Andrea sighed and stepped aside. "Come in. Sophie's in the living room." His daughter was sprawled on the floor, coloring with Andrea's son, Jake. They were working on some kind of elaborate masterpiece involving dragons and rainbows. "Hey, sweetheart," Ethan said, crouching down. Sophie looked up, grinned, and threw her arms around his neck. "Daddy! You being good?" "Uh-huh. Jake and I are making a castle." "I can see that. It looks amazing." She beamed and went back to coloring. Ethan stood and followed Andrea into the kitchen. "She's fine," Andrea said, reading his mind. "She's always fine here. You know that." "I know. So why do you look like you're about to bolt?" "I'm not." "Ethan." He leaned against the counter and rubbed his face. I hate leaving her." "She's with family. She's safe." "I know." "Then what's the problem?" He didn't know how to explain it. The guilt. The constant gnawing feeling that he wasn't doing enough, that he was failing her somehow, that one day she'd realize her dad was just barely holding it together and she deserved better. "There's a work thing tonight," he said instead. "Company gala. I have to go." "So go." "I don't want to." Andrea gave him a look. "When's the last time you did something for yourself?" "This isn't for me. It's mandatory." "You know what I mean." He did, but he didn't have an answer. "Just go," Andrea said gently. "Have a drink. Talk to someone who isn't 5 years old or drowning in logistics reports. Be a person for a few hours." "I don't know how to do that anymore." "Then figure it out." The gala was exactly what Ethan expected. Too many people, too much noise, too much of everything. The venue was a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs, and waiters in black vests circulating with trays of champagne that cost more per glass than Ethan wanted to think about. The company had rented the place out for the night, some kind of end-of-quarter celebration, a chance for upper management to pat themselves on the back and pretend the last 3 months hadn't been a logistical nightmare. Ethan stood near the bar, nursing a glass of whiskey he didn't really want, and watched the crowd with the detached interest of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. A jazz trio played in the corner, decent but barely audible over the hum of conversation. People clustered in groups, laughing too loud, shaking hands, exchanging business cards like they were currency. Ethan recognized maybe half of them. The rest were strangers, clients, executives from other companies, people who existed in a world he didn't quite belong to. "Ethan Walker, man of the hour." He turned to find Marcus Reeves grinning at him, drink in hand, tie already loosened despite the event having started less than an hour ago. "Didn't think you'd show," Marcus said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Didn't have a choice." "Fair, but hey, you're here now, might as well enjoy it." Marcus gestured toward the crowd. "Half the C-suite's here. Good chance to make an impression." "I'm good." "You're impossible, you know that?" Ethan didn't argue. He took another sip of whiskey and let his gaze drift across the room. That's when he saw her. She was standing near the far wall, talking to someone Ethan didn't recognize. Mid-20s, maybe. Dark hair pulled back in a loose bun, wearing a black dress that was elegant without trying too hard. Simple. Confident. She was laughing at something the other person said, her head tilted slightly, her expression open in a way that felt rare in a room like this. Ethan didn't know why he kept looking, but he did. There was something about her, the way she held herself, the way she didn't seem to need the room's approval, like she existed on her own terms and didn't particularly care what anyone else thought about it. "That's Aria Bennett," Marcus said, following his line of sight. Ethan blinked. "Bennett?" "Yeah, as in Bennett and Cross. Old man Bennett's niece. Just started last month. Marketing, I think. Maybe strategy? Hell if I know. She's been making waves, though. Smart. Doesn't take any shit." Marcus grinned. "Why? Interested?" "No." "Right." Marcus's grin widened. Sure you're not. Ethan turned back to his drink, suddenly annoyed with himself. I'm not. Okay, relax. Marcus raised his hands in mock surrender. Just saying, she's sharp. And single, from what I hear. Though half the building's probably already tried. Good for her. Marcus laughed, clearly enjoying himself, and wandered off to chase down another conversation, leaving Ethan alone again. He stayed where he was, telling himself not to look across the room again. He looked anyway. She was still there, still talking, still laughing. And then, as if she could feel his gaze, she glanced over. Their eyes met. Just for a second. Then she looked away, said something to the person she was talking to, and moved toward the bar. Toward him. Ethan's heart did something stupid in his chest. He told himself to walk away, to find Marcus, to go literally anywhere else. But he didn't move, and then she was there, standing next to him, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something light, floral, not overpowering. You look like you'd rather be anywhere else, she said. Her voice was warmer than he expected. Direct. No pretense. He turned, and there she was. Aria Bennett. Up close. Closer than he'd expected. She was smiling. Not polite, not performative. Genuine. Like she'd just caught him in the middle of something he didn't want anyone to see. I don't do well at these things, he said, the words coming out sharper than he intended. Yeah, I picked up on that. She didn't seem offended. If anything, she looked amused. You've been standing in the same spot for 20 minutes. Either you're waiting for someone or you're counting down the seconds until you can leave. Option 2. She laughed. A real laugh, not the careful kind people used at events like this, the kind that actually reached her eyes. I'm Aria, she said, extending her hand. Ethan. Her handshake was firm, confident. She held his gaze just a second longer than necessary, and something in that look, direct, unflinching, curious, made him forget for just a moment that he'd been trying to leave. So, she said, tilting her head slightly, what do you do here, Ethan? Operations, senior role, mostly logistics, supply chain coordination, making sure things get from point A to point B without falling apart. Sounds thrilling. He almost smiled. It's not. Then why do it? The question was simple, but the way she asked it, like she actually wanted to know, like she wasn't just making conversation, threw him off. Because someone has to, he said finally, and I'm good at it. Fair. She studied him for a moment, her expression softening into something more thoughtful. You've got that look. What look? The one that says you're holding everything together by sheer willpower and probably haven't taken a real breath in months. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, because she was right, completely, uncomfortably right, and she knew it. Sorry, she said, her tone shifting slightly. I didn't mean to. It's fine. No, really. I have a bad habit of saying exactly what I'm thinking. My uncle keeps telling me it's going to get me in trouble one of these days. Your uncle, James Bennett, co-founder, which I'm sure you've already figured out by now. Marcus mentioned it. Of course he did. She rolled her eyes. He's probably told half the building by now. I swear that man can't keep anything to himself. Ethan found himself almost smiling again. You don't seem thrilled about that. I'm not. I didn't want the job because of my last name. I wanted it because I'm actually good at what I do. But here we are. She paused, then looked at him directly. You don't care about any of that, do you? Should I? Most people do. I'm not most people. She smiled, slow, almost surprised, like he'd said something unexpected. No, I don't think you are. The conversation should have ended there. He should have excused himself, made some polite comment about needing to network or check his phone, walked away and gone back to being invisible in the crowd. But he didn't. Instead, he stayed. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan Walker let himself be present in a moment he hadn't planned for. Can I ask you something? Aria said. Sure. Why are you really here? He frowned. What do you mean? I mean, you clearly don't want to be here. You look like you're one bad conversation away from bolting, so why show up at all? Because my boss said I had to. And you always do what you're told? When it comes to keeping my job? Yeah. She nodded slowly, like she was processing that. Fair enough. But there's more to it than that, isn't there? Like what? Like you're the kind of person who shows up even when you don't want to because you think that's what responsible people do, even if it's killing you. The observation landed harder than it should have. You don't know me, Ethan said quietly. No, but I'm good at reading people. She paused. And you're not as hard to read as you think you are. He didn't know whether to be annoyed or impressed. Settled on neither. What about you? He asked, deflecting. Why are you here? Same reason as you. Obligation. Except in my case, it's family obligation, which is somehow worse. How so? Because when your uncle is one of the founders, you don't really get to say no. Every event, every meeting, every opportunity to make connections, she made air quotes with her fingers, becomes a test. Prove you deserve to be here. Prove you're not just riding on the family name. It gets exhausting. Sounds like it. Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I am. But sometimes I wish people would just let me do my job without turning it into some kind of referendum on nepotism. Ethan understood that, more than she probably realized. People are always going to talk, he said. Doesn't matter what you do or how good you are at it. They'll find something. Voice of experience? Something like that. She looked at him for a long moment, and he had the unsettling feeling that she was seeing more than he wanted her to. You've been through something, she said quietly. Haven't you? It wasn't really a question, and he didn't really have an answer, not one he wanted to give anyway. We should probably mingle, he said, changing the subject. Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? Arya smiled, knowing, gentle, like she understood exactly what he was doing and was letting him get away with it. Yeah, she said, probably, but neither of them moved. The next hour passed in a way Ethan didn't expect. They talked. Not about work, not about the company, not about the carefully curated version of themselves they were supposed to present at events like this. Just things. She told him about moving to the city 6 months ago, how she'd left a perfectly good job in Boston because her uncle had convinced her that this was a better opportunity, how she'd been second-guessing that decision ever since. It's a good company, she said. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know anyone here, and the work is fine, just fine, which isn't what I signed up for. What did you sign up for? Something meaningful. Something that actually matters. She shrugged. I know how that sounds. Naive, probably. Not naive, just optimistic. Is there a difference? Yeah. Naive means you don't know better. Optimistic means you do, and you choose to believe anyway. She looked at him, something shifting in her expression. That's the most hopeful thing I've heard all night. Don't get used to it, she laughed. Ethan found himself asking questions he wouldn't normally ask. About her life, her interests, what she did when she wasn't at work. I run, she said, early mornings usually, before the city wakes up. It's the only time everything feels quiet enough to think. I get that. Do you run? Used to. Haven't had time in a while. You should start again. Maybe. I'm serious. It helps. Trust me. He didn't tell her that he'd stopped running around the same time his wife left, that it had been one of the things they used to do together, that he'd tried once, about 6 months after she was gone, and made it half a mile before he had to stop because he couldn't breathe through the weight of everything he was carrying. Instead, he just nodded. I'll think about it. She smiled, satisfied. The conversation shifted. She asked about him, where he was from, how long he'd been at the company, what he did outside of work. Not much, he admitted. I have a daughter, 5 years old. Most of my time goes to her. That's sweet. It's survival. She tilted her head. Just you? No. No, just us. He saw the question in her eyes, saw her hesitate, weighing whether to ask. It's fine, he said. You can ask. What happened? My wife left. 2 years ago. Decided she didn't want to be married anymore. Didn't want to be a mother. Just didn't want any of it. The words came out flat, factual, like he was reciting someone else's story. Arya's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes softened. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Don't be. It's over. That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. He looked away, out at the crowd, at the people laughing and drinking and pretending their lives were simple. It did, he said finally, for a long time. But I don't have the luxury of falling apart, so I just kept going. For your daughter, yeah. What's her name? Sophie. That's beautiful. She is. Arya didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there, present, not trying to fill the silence with empty platitudes. And somehow that was exactly what he needed. Thank you, she said finally. For what? For telling me. I know that wasn't easy. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. Most people don't, she continued. Tell the truth, I mean, especially not at things like this. Everyone's so busy performing, pretending they've got it all figured out. It's refreshing to meet someone who doesn't. I'm not trying to be refreshing, I'm just tired of pretending. Then don't. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something in her expression he hadn't expected. Not pity, not sympathy, just understanding. And maybe, underneath that, a flicker of something else. Something he wasn't ready to name. The crowd had started to thin by the time Ethan glanced at his watch. 10:47. He'd been talking to Arya for almost 2 hours. I should probably go, he said, more to himself than to her. Yeah, me too. But neither of them moved. The jazz trio had packed up. The waiters were clearing glasses. A few groups lingered near the exits, finishing conversations, exchanging final pleasantries. Arya looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment the noise of the room seemed to fall away entirely. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why do you look like you're waiting for something to go wrong? The question landed like a physical thing. Because she was right. Again. He did. He was. He'd been waiting for 2 years, waiting for the next disaster, the next collapse, the next moment when everything he'd carefully rebuilt came crashing down, because it usually does, he said quietly. She didn't flinch, didn't try to reassure him or tell him he was being too pessimistic or that things would get better if he just tried harder. She just nodded. Yeah, she said. I get that. And somehow, that simple acknowledgement, that willingness to sit with his fear instead of trying to fix it, meant more than any comforting words could have. They stood there for another moment, the space between them charged with something Ethan couldn't quite define. Then Arya reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Give me your number, she said. What? Your number, unless you don't want to. He hesitated. This was a line. A clear, definable line. Crossing it meant something. But when he looked at her, at the openness in her expression, the lack of agenda, the simple honesty, he found himself pulling out his phone. Okay, they exchanged numbers. She typed his name in with a small smile. There, she said. Now we're officially friends. Is that what we are? I don't know. What do you want us to be? The question hung in the air between them. Ethan didn't have an answer, wasn't sure he was ready to find one. I should go, he said again. This time, he meant it. Yeah, Arya said, but she was still smiling. Me too. They walked toward the exit together, not quite side by side, but close enough. At the door, she stopped and turned to face him. Thank you for tonight, she said. I didn't do anything. You were honest. That's not nothing. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Arya. She walked toward the parking garage, and he stood there for a moment, watching her go. Then he got in his car and drove to his sister's place to pick up Sophie. And for the first time in a very long time, Ethan Walker went to bed thinking about someone other than his daughter. 3 days passed before Arya texted him. Ethan had almost convinced himself it wouldn't happen, that the number exchange had been polite momentum, nothing more, that she'd wake up the next morning and realize she'd spent 2 hours talking to a divorced single father with nothing interesting to offer and move on with her life. But on Thursday afternoon, while he was halfway through a conference call about container routing, his phone buzzed. Arya. So I'm working on a project that involves coordinating cross-departmental logistics, and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. Any chance you'd be willing to grab coffee and save me from embarrassing myself in front of my uncle? He stared at the message for longer than he should have. The conference call droned on in the background. Someone was arguing about transit times. Someone else was talking about cost optimization. Ethan had stopped listening. He typed a response, deleted it, typed another. Ethan, when? Her reply came almost immediately. Arya, tomorrow? 10 a.m.? There's a coffee shop on 5th and Main. Ethan, I'll be there. He set the phone down and realized his heart was beating faster than it had any right to. It was just coffee, just work, nothing more. But even as he told himself that, he knew it wasn't entirely true. The next morning, Ethan dropped Sophie off at kindergarten, drove downtown, and spent 20 minutes circling the block looking for parking. By the time he walked into the coffee shop, he was 10 minutes late and already annoyed with himself. The place was busy, too busy for a Friday morning. Every table seemed occupied by someone with a laptop and expensive headphones, pretending to work while actually scrolling through social media. He spotted Arya in the back corner. She saw him at the same moment and waved, smiling in a way that made the 10-minute parking odyssey feel slightly less irritating. Sorry, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. Parking was a nightmare. It always is. I should have warned you. She pushed a cup toward him. I got you a black coffee. Guessed based on the fact that you don't seem like a latte person. Good guess. I'm observant. He took a sip. It was good. Strong. Exactly what he needed. Arya had her tablet out, screen filled with charts and diagrams that looked simultaneously professional and chaotic. She swiped through a few screens, frowned, then turned it toward him. Okay, so here's the situation. My uncle wants to streamline the supply chain for our East Coast distribution network. We've got 3 warehouses, 7 major clients, and approximately 0 coordination between any of them. I'm supposed to figure out how to make it work better, but every time I think I have a plan, I realize there's some factor I didn't account for. Ethan studied the screen. What kind of factors? Transit delays, seasonal demand fluctuations, the fact that 2 of our warehouses apparently hate each other and refuse to share inventory data. She exhaled. I don't know, everything? He almost smiled. Can I? She handed him the tablet. For the next 20 minutes, they worked through it. Ethan asked questions, methodical, specific, and Arya answered them with the kind of detail that told him she'd actually done her homework. She wasn't just throwing the problem at him and hoping he'd solve it. She wanted to understand. He sketched out a rough framework on a napkin. Distribution priorities, backup routing, communication protocols between facilities. This is what you need, he said, sliding the napkin across the table. It's not complicated, but it requires everyone to actually follow the system, which is usually the hard part. Arya studied the napkin like it was a treasure map. This is brilliant. It's basic logistics. To you, maybe. To me, it's wizardry. She looked up, grinning. Seriously, thank you. I was about to have a breakdown in front of my uncle, and that's the last thing I need right now. Why would that be the last thing you need? Her smile faded slightly. Because he's already looking for reasons to prove I can't handle this job. One mistake, one public failure, and I'm done. Doesn't matter that I've been working in strategy for 6 years. Doesn't matter that I have a track record. All that matters is that I'm family, which means I have to be twice as good to be taken half as seriously. Ethan understood that kind of pressure, the constant feeling that you were one mistake away from losing everything. That's exhausting, he said. It really is. They sat in silence for a moment. Not awkward, just present. Then Arya's expression shifted into something lighter. Okay, your turn. My turn for what? To tell me something. I just unloaded my entire existential work crisis on you. Fair's fair. I don't have an existential work crisis. Everyone has an existential something. He took another sip of coffee, buying time. I don't know what you want me to say. Anything. Tell me about your daughter. You said her name's Sophie, right? The shift caught him off guard. Most people didn't ask about Sophie. Not really. They'd make polite comments, nod sympathetically when he mentioned being a single parent, then change the subject as quickly as possible. But Arya was looking at him like she actually wanted to know. She's 5, Ethan said slowly. Smart, funny, asks about 1,000,000 questions a day and never seems satisfied with the answers. Sounds exhausting. It is, but in a good way. He paused. She's the only thing I've ever done that actually matters. Arya's expression softened. That's beautiful. It's true. Does she look like you? She's got my eyes. Everything else is her mother. He regretted the words the moment they left his mouth. But Arya didn't push. Didn't ask the obvious follow-up questions. Instead, she just said, "I'd love to meet her sometime, if that's okay." Ethan didn't know what to say to that, because no one had ever asked before, not since his wife left. "Maybe," he said finally. "We'll see." Arya smiled. "That's not a no. It's not a yes either." "I'll take it." They stayed for another hour. The conversation drifted. She told him about growing up in Connecticut, about her parents' expectations, about how she'd spent most of her 20s trying to prove she was more than her last name. He told her about Sophie's obsession with unicorns, about the time she'd tried to convince him that vegetables weren't real food, about the way she hummed to herself when she thought no one was listening. And somewhere in the middle of all that talking, something shifted. Not dramatically, not obviously, but enough. When they finally left, standing outside on the sidewalk with the midday sun breaking through the clouds, Arya turned to him and said, "We should do this again." "The logistics consultation?" "The talking." She paused. "I like talking to you." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. Not panic, not quite, but close. "I like talking to you too," he heard himself say. And he meant it, which was the part that scared him. Over the next 2 weeks, it became a routine. Coffee on Friday mornings, lunch on Tuesdays when their schedules aligned, quick conversations in the hallway at work that stretched longer than they should have. Ethan told himself it was professional, networking, helping a colleague navigate a new role. But he knew better. And so did she. One Tuesday, they grabbed sandwiches from a deli near the office and ate them on a bench in the small park across the street. It was unusually warm for late autumn, and the trees still had a few stubborn leaves clinging to their branches. "Can I ask you something personal?" Arya said, halfway through her sandwich. "You're going to anyway." She smiled. "Fair. Why operations, like really? You're clearly smart enough to do anything. Why choose something so boring?" "I was going to say structured." "Same thing." He set his sandwich down, considering. "I needed stability. After my wife left, everything felt like it was falling apart. I couldn't control what she did, or how Sophie was going to process it, or any of the big, terrifying things, but I could control shipment schedules, routing plans, inventory management. So you chose the most controllable career possible, basically. And it works for you?" "It did." He paused. It does. Arya studied him for a long moment. "You don't sound convinced." "I'm not unconvinced. That's not the same thing." He didn't have a response to that, because she was right, again. "What about you?" he asked, deflecting. "Why strategy? Why not something more creative?" "Because strategy is creative. It's just creative in a way that people actually pay for." She took another bite, chewed thoughtfully. "I like solving puzzles. I like figuring out how things fit together, and I'm good at it, even if my uncle doesn't always see that." "He will?" "You don't know that." "Yes, I do, because you're relentless, and people like that always win eventually." She looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. "You have more faith in me than I have in myself. Then you should trust my judgment." She laughed. "Is that how this works?" "Apparently." They finished eating in comfortable silence. The park was nearly empty, just a few people walking dogs, a jogger making loops around the perimeter. "Ethan," Arya said quietly. "Yeah?" "What are we doing?" The question hung between them. He could have pretended not to understand. Could have deflected, made a joke, changed the subject. But he didn't. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Does that scare you?" "Yeah." "Me too." She reached across the bench and touched his hand, just briefly, just long enough for him to feel the warmth of her skin. Then she pulled back and stood up. "I should get back to work," she said. "Yeah, me too." But neither of them moved, not right away. The following Friday, Ethan's boss called him into his office just before lunch. Richard Davidson was in his late 50s, balding, perpetually stressed, and generally tolerable as far as bosses went. He ran operations with an iron fist wrapped in spreadsheets and performance metrics. "Close the door," Davidson said. Ethan's stomach dropped. Nothing good ever started with "close the door." He sat down. Davidson leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in front of him. "I wanted to talk to you about Arya Bennett." Every muscle in Ethan's body tensed. "What about her? You've been spending time with her, lunches, coffee meetings?" Davidson's tone was neutral, but his eyes weren't. People are starting to notice. We're working together on a project. She asked for my help with logistics coordination. I'm sure that's all it is, but perception matters, Ethan. Your senior leadership. She's the founder's niece. That creates complications. What kind of complications? The kind where people wonder if there's favoritism, special treatment, whether professional boundaries are being respected. Ethan's jaw tightened. Nothing inappropriate is happening. I believe you, but it doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what the board believes, what clients believe, what the rest of the staff believes. Davidson leaned forward. I'm not telling you to stop helping her. I'm telling you to be careful, very careful. Is that a threat? It's advice from someone who's seen how these things go. Ethan stood up. Are we done? Sit down. He didn't. Davidson sighed. Look, I'm not trying to make your life difficult, but you've built a good reputation here. Don't throw it away over something that might not be what? Worth it. The words landed like a slap. Ethan turned and walked out without another word. He made it back to his office, closed the door, and sat at his desk staring at nothing. His phone buzzed. Arya. Lunch today? I found a new place. He stared at the message, thought about Davidson's warning, about perception, about how quickly things could fall apart when people started asking questions. He should say no. Should put distance between them before this became something he couldn't control. Instead, he typed, Ethan. Where? They met at a small Italian place 2 blocks from the office. Quiet. Tucked away. The kind of spot that didn't attract the corporate lunch crowd. Arya was already there when he arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a menu in front of her. You look stressed, she said as he slid into the seat across from her. Long morning. Want to talk about it? Not really. She nodded, didn't push. They ordered pasta for her, soup for him. The waitress left, and they sat in silence for a moment. My boss pulled me aside today, Ethan said finally. Arya's expression shifted. About what? About us. She went very still. What did he say? That people are noticing, that it creates complications. Complications. His word, not mine. Arya set her menu down carefully. Did he tell you to stop seeing me? He told me to be careful. And are you going to be? Ethan looked at her. Really looked at her. At the way she was holding herself together, even though he could see the hurt in her eyes. I don't know, he said honestly. That's fair. Is it? Yeah, because I don't know either. She exhaled slowly. I didn't mean for this to get complicated. Neither did I. But it is. Complicated, I mean. Yeah. The waitress returned with their food. They ate in silence. Not comfortable this time. Waited. Halfway through the meal, Arya set her fork down. I like you, she said quietly. I know that's probably not what you want to hear right now, but I'm tired of pretending I don't. Ethan's heart was pounding. Arya, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. She looked at him directly. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm not asking you to risk your job or your reputation or whatever else you're worried about. I just needed to be honest. He didn't know what to say, because the truth was, he liked her too, more than he should, more than was safe. This is a bad idea, he said finally. I know. I have a daughter, a life. I can't afford to screw this up. I know that too. Then why? Because I can't help it. She smiled, sad and genuine at the same time. I've tried, trust me, but I can't stop thinking about you. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. I can't stop thinking about you either, he admitted. The words hung between them, raw. True. Terrifying. Arya reached across the table and took his hand. So what do we do? She asked. I don't know. That seems to be our answer for everything. Despite everything, he almost smiled. Yeah. They sat there, hands linked across the table, neither of them willing to let go. The next few weeks blurred together in a way that felt both inevitable and impossible. They tried to be careful, tried to keep things professional when other people were around. But it was getting harder. Stolen glances during meetings, text messages late at night when Sophie was asleep and Ethan couldn't turn his mind off. Moments in the hallway where they stood just a little too close for just a little too long. One evening, Ethan was working late, actually working, not just hiding from an empty apartment, when there was a knock on his office door. "It's open." Arya stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She crossed the room and sat on the edge of his desk, close enough that he could smell her perfume. "Everyone else is gone," she said. "I know. So we're alone." "Yeah." She looked at him with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "I need to ask you something," she said, "and I need you to be honest." "Okay. Do you want this? Whatever this is between us. Do you actually want it, or are you just going along with it because you don't know how to stop?" The question hit him square in the chest, because he'd been asking himself the same thing for weeks, and he still didn't have a good answer. "I don't know how to do this," he said quietly. "I don't know how to let someone in again without being terrified that they're going to leave. I'm not her." "I know. Do you?" He looked at her, really looked at her. "Yes," he said. "I do." She slid off the desk and stood in front of him, close, too close. "Then what are you afraid of?" "That I'll mess this up, that I'll hurt you, that Sophie will get attached and then—" "Stop." "What?" "Stop catastrophizing. Stop waiting for everything to fall apart." She reached out and touched his face, gentle but firm. "I'm not asking for forever. I'm not asking you to blow up your life. I'm just asking you to stop running." Ethan's breath caught. "What if I don't know how?" "Then I'll wait until you figure it out." And before he could respond, before he could think, she leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't tentative this time. It was certain. And Ethan, for the first time in 2 years, stopped fighting. He kissed her back, hands sliding to her waist, pulling her closer. She made a small sound against his mouth, her fingers tangling in his hair. They broke apart, breathing hard. "We can't do this here," Ethan managed. "I know." "Someone could come back." "I know." But neither of them moved. "Ethan," she whispered. "Yeah." "Take me home." His heart stopped. "Arya, not like that. Not yet. Just take me somewhere that isn't here. Somewhere we can just be." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he grabbed his jacket. "Let's go." They ended up at his apartment. Ethan had never brought anyone here, not since his wife left. It felt too personal, too exposing. But somehow, with Arya, it felt right. She walked through the small living room, taking in the scattered toys, the framed drawings on the wall, the life he'd built with just him and his daughter. "It's nice," she said. "It's small. It's home." She turned to face him, and for a moment they just stood there. "I should make coffee or something," Ethan said, suddenly unsure of what to do with his hands. "You don't have to." "I know, but She crossed the distance between them and kissed him again. Slower this time, deeper. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I meant what I said," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." "How?" "Because I've never felt like this before, and I'm not stupid enough to walk away from it." Ethan closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Me too." "But you're still here." "So are you." They stood there, wrapped in each other, the world narrowing down to just this moment. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be real. They spent the next hour on his couch, talking, kissing, existing in a space that felt separate from everything else. Arya asked about Sophie, about what she liked, what made her laugh, what scared her. Ethan found himself answering honestly. Not the sanitized version he gave to acquaintances, the real version. "She still asks about her mother sometimes," he said. "Not often, but when she does, I never know what to say." "What do you tell her?" "The truth. That her mom loves her but couldn't stay. That it's not her fault." "Is it enough?" "I don't know. I hope so." Arya rested her head on his shoulder. "You're a good dad." "I'm trying. That's all anyone can do." Around midnight, Arya's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and sighed. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "You don't have to. I want to stay. But if I do, I'm going to fall asleep here, and I'm not sure either of us is ready for that conversation with Sophie in the morning. She was right. He knew she was right, but he didn't want her to leave. He walked her to the door. They stood there, neither quite ready to let go. Thank you, Arya said softly. For what? For letting me in. He kissed her one more time, gentle, lingering. Text me when you get home, he said. I will. She left, and Ethan stood in the doorway watching until her car disappeared around the corner. Then he closed the door, leaned against it, and realized something had fundamentally changed. He wasn't alone anymore, and that was the most terrifying, beautiful thing he'd felt in years. The next morning, Sophie noticed something was different. You look happy, she said over breakfast. Ethan paused mid-pour with the orange juice. What? You're smiling. You don't usually smile in the morning. Sure I do. Nuh-uh. You make your coffee face, but today you're smiling. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just ruffled her hair and said, Eat your eggs. She did, but she kept watching him with those too perceptive 5-year-old eyes. And Ethan realized that no matter how careful he was, eventually Sophie was going to figure it out. Eventually, he was going to have to tell her about Arya. And he had no idea how to do that without risking her heart along with his own. But that was a problem for another day. For now, he had eggs to finish and a kindergartner to get to school. And somewhere across the city, Arya was probably waking up thinking about him. And that was enough. For 3 weeks, they existed in a careful bubble. Ethan would drop Sophie at school, head to work, maintain his usual professional distance during meetings and hallway conversations. But then lunch would come, or the end of the day, and somehow he'd find himself in Arya's office, or she'd appear at his door with coffee and a question that didn't really need asking. They were careful, deliberate, never left together, never arrived together, kept their interactions brief when other people were around. But anyone paying attention would have noticed, and someone was. It started with Marcus. So, he said one Thursday afternoon, leaning against Ethan's doorframe with that knowing grin plastered across his face. You and Bennett. Ethan didn't look up from his computer. Me and Bennett what? Come on. I've seen you two. The coffee runs, the long lunches. You're not exactly subtle. We're working on a project. Right. A project. Marcus's grin widened. Is that what we're calling it now? Get out of my office, Marcus. I'm just saying, good for you, man. She's smart, pretty, and she actually seems to like you, which is a minor miracle considering your sparkling personality. Ethan finally looked up. Are you done? Almost. Just one question. Does her uncle know? The question landed heavier than Marcus probably intended. There's nothing to know. Sure there isn't? Marcus pushed off the doorframe. Just be careful, okay? Office politics and all that. You know how people get. He left before Ethan could respond. Ethan sat there, staring at his computer screen without seeing it, Marcus's words echoing in his head. Does her uncle know? The truth was, Ethan had been actively avoiding thinking about James Bennett, about what would happen if the co-founder of the company discovered his niece was spending most of her free time with a divorced operations manager who had nothing to offer except baggage and a 5-year-old. His phone buzzed. Arya. Still on for tonight? Tonight. Right. He'd agreed to have dinner at her place. Actually agreed, despite every instinct telling him this was moving too fast, getting too real, crossing lines he'd sworn he'd never cross again. Ethan. Yeah, what time? Arya. 7? I'm making pasta. Fair warning, I'm not a great cook. Ethan. Can't be worse than mine. Arya. Challenge accepted. He almost smiled. Almost. But Marcus's question kept nagging at him. Does her uncle know? At 6:30, Ethan stood in his bedroom staring at his closet like it held the answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. What did you wear to dinner at the apartment of a woman you were definitely falling for but hadn't officially defined anything with? Casual felt too dismissive. Formal felt ridiculous. Daddy, why are you just standing there? He turned to find Sophie in the doorway, still in her school clothes, holding Mr. Whiskers. I'm thinking. About what? What to wear. She tilted her head, considering this very serious problem. The blue one. You look nice in blue. You think so? Uh-huh. Aunt Andrea says blue makes your eyes look less tired. Ethan didn't know whether to laugh or feel insulted. He grabbed the blue shirt. Where are you going? Sophie asked, and there it was. The question he'd been dreading. I have a work dinner, he said, which wasn't technically a lie. With who? A colleague. Is it a boy or a girl? He hesitated just long enough for Sophie's eyes to widen with interest. It's a girl, isn't it? It's a work colleague who happens to be a woman, yes. Is she your friend? Yeah, she is. Sophie studied him with an intensity that felt uncomfortably adult. Do you like her? Sophie. Because it's okay if you do. Mia's dad has a girlfriend, and she's really nice. She brings cookies sometimes. Ethan's throat tightened. He knelt down so they were eye level. I do like her, he said carefully. But it's complicated, and I need to figure some things out before I can explain it properly. Okay? Sophie nodded, serious. Okay. You're staying with Aunt Andrea tonight. She's making mac and cheese. The good kind? The good kind. That satisfied her. She skipped off to pack her overnight bag, and Ethan stood there feeling like he'd just navigated a minefield while blindfolded. Arya's apartment was in a renovated building on the west side. Newer than Ethan's place. Nicer. The kind of building that had a doorman and actual security. He buzzed up at 7 exactly. Come up, her voice crackled through the intercom. 5th floor, apartment 5C. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have. When he reached her door, it was already open. Arya stood in the doorway wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater, barefoot, hair down, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her at the office. Hey, she said, smiling. Hey, come in. Fair warning, I may have slightly oversold my cooking abilities. He stepped inside and was immediately hit with the smell of garlic and something burning. Is that the garlic bread? I know. I got distracted. She rushed back to the kitchen, and Ethan followed, watching as she pulled a tray from the oven. The bread was definitely darker than intended. It's fine, he said. It's charcoal. I've had worse. She looked at him, and despite the kitchen disaster, she was grinning. You're just saying that to be nice. I'm really not. They worked together to salvage dinner. The pasta was actually good. Simple marinara, nothing fancy, but competent. The bread was inedible, but they laughed about it. Arya opened a bottle of wine, poured 2 glasses, and they settled on her couch with plates balanced on their laps. This is nice, Arya said quietly. Yeah, it is. I can't remember the last time I cooked for someone. I can't remember the last time someone cooked for me, even badly. She kicked his leg gently. It's not that bad. The bread would disagree. We're never speaking of the bread again. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. The apartment was small but well decorated. Actual art on the walls, books on shelves, plants that looked like they were actually being watered. You have a nice place, Ethan said. Thanks. It's temporary. I'm still not sure I'm staying long term. In the apartment or the city? Both, maybe. That caught him off guard. You're thinking about leaving? I don't know. Depends on how things go with the job. With my uncle, with... She stopped herself. With what? Nothing. Arya. She set her plate down and turned to face him. With you. It depends on how things go with you. The words hung between them. That's a lot of pressure, Ethan said quietly. I know, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have... Don't apologize. He set his own plate aside. I just need you to understand something. Okay, I'm not good at this. Relationships, being vulnerable, letting people in. I spent 2 years building walls specifically so I wouldn't have to do any of that again. I know. And you're asking me to tear them all down. No, I'm not. She moved closer, took his hand. I'm asking you to maybe open a door. Just one. See what happens. He looked at their linked hands, at how natural it felt, how terrifying. What if I open the door and everything falls apart? What if you don't, and you spend the rest of your life wondering what could have been? He didn't have an answer for that. So instead, he kissed her. She responded immediately, hands sliding up to his shoulders, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, and suddenly they were tangled together on the couch. 2 years of loneliness and fear and desperate hope pouring into this one moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Arya rested her forehead against his. "Stay," she whispered. "Arya, I'm not asking for anything except this. Just stay, please." Every rational part of his brain screamed that this was too much too fast, but the rest of him didn't care. "Okay," he said. They moved to her bedroom, slowly, carefully, like they were both terrified of breaking whatever fragile thing was forming between them. And when they finally came together, it wasn't perfect. It was messy and uncertain and punctuated by nervous laughter and whispered reassurances. But it was real. And for Ethan, that was everything. Later, lying in the dark with Arya curled against his chest, her breathing slow and steady, Ethan stared at the ceiling and felt the full weight of what he'd just done. He'd let someone in. Actually, completely let someone in. And now there was no going back. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. He reached for it carefully, trying not to wake Arya. A text from his sister. "Andrea. Sophie's asleep. Take your time. And whoever she is, I hope she's worth it." He set the phone down and looked at the woman sleeping beside him. Worth it. He hoped so too. The next morning, Ethan woke up to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. For a disorienting moment, he didn't know where he was. Then it all came rushing back. He sat up, running a hand through his hair, and found his shirt draped over a chair. Through the open doorway, he could hear Arya moving around in the kitchen, humming something off-key. He got dressed and followed the sound. She was standing at the counter in an oversized t-shirt and bare legs, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. When she saw him, her face lit up. "Morning," she said. "Morning. Coffee? Please." She handed him a mug, and they stood there for a moment, the morning stretching between them. "So," Arya said finally, "that happened." "Yeah." "Regrets?" He considered the question, really considered it. "No," he said honestly. "You?" "Not even a little." Relief flooded through him. "I should probably get going," he said reluctantly. "I need to pick up Sophie." "Right, of course." She set her mug down. "Can I ask you something before you go?" "Sure." "What happens now? With us, I mean." It was the same question he'd been asking himself since he woke up. "I don't know," he admitted. "This is all new territory for me." "Me too. But I want to figure it out, if you do." She smiled. "I do." "Okay then." "Okay." He kissed her goodbye at the door, gentle, promising. Then he drove across town to pick up his daughter, his mind spinning with possibilities and consequences in equal measure. The first real crack appeared on Monday. Ethan was in a budget meeting when his phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Marcus, you might want to check your email. Now." He frowned, pulled up his inbox on his laptop, and felt his stomach drop. The subject line read, "Workplace Relationships Policy Review." It was from HR, and it was addressed to him and Arya. The meeting droned on around him, but Ethan wasn't listening anymore. He scanned the email quickly, his heart pounding. Professional boundaries. Potential conflicts of interest. Mandatory disclosure requirements. A meeting scheduled for Wednesday afternoon. He looked up and caught Arya's eye across the conference room. She'd gotten the same email. He could see it in her face. When the meeting finally ended, they both hung back, waiting until the room cleared. "Did you?" Arya started. "Yeah." "What does this mean?" "It means someone reported us." Her face went pale. "Who would do that?" "I don't know, but we need to figure out what we're going to say." "The truth?" "Which is what, exactly? That we're dating? That it's serious? That we're just figuring it out?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustration bleeding into his voice. "We don't even know what this is." "I know what it is to me." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" "The point is that I could lose my job over this. You could lose yours. And we need to decide if that's a risk we're willing to take." Arya stepped back like he'd slapped her. "Is that what this is to you? A risk assessment?" "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" He didn't have a good answer. The silence stretched between them, heavy and jagged. "I have a daughter," Ethan said finally. "I can't make decisions based on what I want. I have to think about what's best for her." "And being with me isn't what's best?" I didn't say that. You didn't have to. She grabbed her laptop and walked out. Ethan stood there in the empty conference room, feeling like he'd just made the worst mistake of his life, but he didn't know how to fix it. The HR meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on Wednesday. Ethan spent the entire morning preparing, reviewing company policy, drafting explanations, trying to figure out how to make this sound professional and appropriate when the truth was he'd fallen for someone he worked with and didn't know how to untangle that from everything else. He hadn't spoken to Arya since Monday. She'd texted once. Arya, we need to talk before the meeting. He'd responded. Ethan. Agreed. Lunch? But she never replied. At 1:30, he gave up trying to work and headed to the HR office on the 3rd floor. Arya was already there, sitting in one of the chairs outside the conference room, staring at her phone. She looked up when he approached. Hey, he said. Hey. Are you okay? Not really. He sat down beside her, keeping a careful distance. Arya, about what I said, don't. Not here. I need you to know I didn't mean, Ethan, please, let's just get through this first. The conference room door opened. A woman in her 40s stepped out. Patricia Chen, head of HR, professional, efficient, the kind of person who smiled without warmth. Mr. Walker, Miss Bennett, please come in. They followed her inside. James Bennett was sitting at the conference table. Ethan's heart stopped. Arya went rigid beside him. Uncle James, she said quietly. Arya. His voice was cold, clipped. Please sit down, both of you. They sat. Patricia closed the door and took her own seat, tablet in front of her. Thank you both for coming, she said. We'll keep this brief. It's been brought to our attention that the two of you have been engaging in a personal relationship. Is that accurate? Ethan glanced at Arya. She was staring at her uncle. Yes, Ethan said. It's accurate. And you're aware of the company's policy regarding workplace relationships? I am. Patricia tapped her tablet. The policy requires disclosure of any romantic relationship between employees, particularly when one party is in a senior leadership position. You failed to disclose. It's new, Arya said, finding her voice. We weren't trying to hide anything. We were just figuring things out. James Bennett leaned forward. How long has this been going on? A few weeks? And you didn't think to mention it? I didn't think it was anyone's business. You didn't think... He stopped himself, visibly controlling his anger. Arya, you are my niece. You represent this family, this company, and you're involved with a subordinate employee who reports to the same executive structure. He's not my subordinate. We're in completely different departments. That's not the point. Then what is the point? Arya's voice rose. That I'm not allowed to have a personal life? That everything I do reflects on you? That's exactly the point. Ethan had stayed silent through this entire exchange, watching it unfold like a car crash he couldn't prevent. But now he spoke. Mr. Bennett, if you're looking for someone to blame, blame me. Arya didn't do anything wrong. James turned to him, eyes cold. I don't recall asking for your input, Mr. Walker. With respect, this involves both of us. Does it? Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like a senior operations manager taking advantage of a young woman who happens to be related to company leadership. The accusation hit like a punch. That's not what this is, Ethan said, keeping his voice level despite the anger flooding through him. Then what is it? It's two people who care about each other trying to navigate a complicated situation. How noble. Uncle James, Arya started. Enough. He stood up. Patricia, I want a full review of both their employment records. Check for any evidence of favoritism, preferential treatment, or policy violations. If I find out this relationship has impacted business decisions in any way, it hasn't, Arya said fiercely. Then you have nothing to worry about. He looked at his niece, and for just a moment, something softer crossed his face. I'm disappointed, Arya. I expected better judgment from you. Then he walked out. The silence he left behind was suffocating. Patricia cleared her throat. Moving forward, we'll need you both to sign disclosure forms. You'll be monitored for any potential conflicts of interest, and I strongly advise you to maintain strict professional boundaries during work hours. And if we don't, Ethan asked, then one or both of you may need to consider transferring departments or finding employment elsewhere. She stood up, gathering her tablet. You're free to go. They left the conference room in silence, made it to the elevator. The doors closed, and Arya finally spoke. I'm sorry. You don't have anything to apologize for. He had no right to talk to you like that. He's your uncle. He's protective. He's a controlling ass. Despite everything, Ethan almost smiled. The elevator doors opened on the 7th floor. They stepped out. Ethan, Arya said. He turned. Are we okay? He looked at her, really looked at her. At the woman who'd somehow managed to break through every defense he'd spent 2 years building. Yeah, he said. We're okay. What do we do now? We keep going, carefully, but we keep going. She nodded, relief flooding her face. Okay. But even as they walked away in opposite directions, Ethan knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. That night, after Sophie was in bed, Ethan sat on the couch with a beer he wasn't drinking and stared at his phone. He should call Arya. Should check in, make sure she was okay after the disaster of a meeting, but he couldn't shake James Bennett's words. Taking advantage. Was that what he was doing? He didn't think so. He knew his own feelings, knew they were real, but doubt had a way of creeping in through the cracks. His phone buzzed. Arya, can you talk? He called her. She answered on the first ring. Hey, he said. I've been thinking. About? About what my uncle said, about the risk, about whether this is worth it. His heart sank. And I'm terrified of losing my job, of losing you, of screwing everything up. She paused. But I'm more terrified of giving up on this without really trying. Relief washed over him. Yeah, me too. So we fight? We fight. Together? Together. He could hear her smile through the phone. Okay then, together. They talked for another hour, about the meeting, about her uncle, about what came next. And when they finally hung up, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not hope, exactly, but possibility. And right now, that was enough. The following week, the rumors started. Whispers in the break room, sideways glances during meetings. The kind of attention that made every interaction feel like it was being scrutinized. Marcus pulled Ethan aside on Friday. People are talking, he said bluntly. Let them talk. I'm serious. Davidson's asking questions. Some of the board members are asking questions. You need to be careful. I am being careful. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're walking into a fire and hoping you don't get burned. Ethan didn't have a response to that, because Marcus was right. That night, Arya came over for dinner. It was the first time she'd been to his apartment since that initial evening, weeks ago. The first time Sophie would meet her properly. Ethan was a nervous wreck. She's 5, Arya said, squeezing his hand. I think I can handle a 5-year-old. She's tough. She asks a lot of questions. So do I. The doorbell rang at 6 exactly. Ethan opened it to find Arya standing there with a bag of groceries and a smile. I brought ingredients for cookies, she said. Thought we could bake together. Before he could respond, Sophie appeared at his elbow. Who are you? I'm Arya. I'm a friend of your dad's. Sophie studied her seriously. Are you the work friend? Yeah, I am. Do you like coloring? I love coloring. Okay, come in. Just like that, the ice was broken. They spent the evening in the kitchen. Arya and Sophie made cookies while Ethan attempted to make dinner without burning anything. There was flour everywhere. Chocolate chips disappeared at an alarming rate. Sophie talked nonstop, and Arya listened like every word mattered. And watching them together, Ethan felt something shift in his chest. This could work. Maybe. Possibly. After dinner, after cookies, after Sophie had extracted a promise from Arya to come back next week, Ethan walked Arya to the door. She's amazing, Arya said softly. She liked you. How can you tell? Because she asked you to come back. She doesn't do that. Arya smiled, but there was something sad in it. What? Ethan asked. Nothing, just this is real now, isn't it? It's not just us anymore, it's her too. Yeah, it is. If that's too much, it's not too much, it's perfect. She kissed him gently. I just don't want to let either of you down. You won't. You don't know that. Yes, I do. And in that moment, standing in his doorway with the woman he was falling for and his daughter singing to herself in the other room, Ethan actually believed it. But belief and reality were two very different things, and reality was about to come crashing down. The crash came on a Tuesday morning. Ethan was at his desk reviewing shipping manifests when his phone rang. Internal extension, Davidson's office. "Walker, I need you in the conference room. Now." The line went dead before Ethan could respond. He stood up, grabbed his laptop, and felt that familiar knot forming in his stomach, the one that had lived there permanently since the HR meeting 2 weeks ago. The conference room was on the 8th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a long table that could seat 20, but today only held 5 people. Davidson, Patricia from HR, James Bennett, a woman Ethan didn't recognize in an expensive suit, and one empty chair. For him. "Sit down, Mr. Walker," the woman said. Her voice was pleasant, professional, the kind of pleasant that made Ethan's skin crawl. He sat. "I'm Jennifer Corso. I represent the board of directors. We've been conducting a review of recent operational decisions, and some concerning patterns have emerged." Ethan's hands tightened on the armrests. "What kind of patterns?" She slid a folder across the table. "Open it." He did. Inside were printed emails, procurement approvals, vendor selections, budget allocations. All legitimate business decisions he'd made over the past 2 months. All involving projects Arya had worked on. "I don't understand," Ethan said slowly. "These decisions," Corso said, tapping the folder, "show a pattern of preferential treatment toward projects associated with Ms. Bennett. Expedited approvals, favorable vendor terms, budget increases that weren't extended to similar projects in other departments. Those decisions were based on project merit and operational efficiency." Were they? Or were they influenced by your personal relationship with Ms. Bennett? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Ethan looked at James Bennett. The older man's face was stone. "Every decision I made was in the best interest of the company," Ethan said carefully. "I can provide documentation, analysis, justification for each one." "I'm sure you can," Corso said. "But perception matters, Mr. Walker. And right now, the perception is that you allowed a romantic relationship to compromise your professional judgment. That's not what happened. Can you prove it?" He couldn't. Not in any way that would satisfy them. Because the truth was murkier than he wanted to admit. Had he given Arya's projects extra attention? Maybe. Had he prioritized her requests because he cared about her success? Possibly. But he'd never made a decision that would harm the company. Never. "Where's Arya?" he asked. "Ms. Bennett is in a separate meeting," Patricia said. "Are you accusing her of the same thing?" "Ms. Bennett's conduct is being reviewed separately." "This is bullshit." The words came out before he could stop them. Davidson's expression darkened. "Watch your tone." "No. You're looking for a reason to get rid of me because I'm dating the founder's niece. You don't actually care about whether my decisions were sound. You care about optics." Corso's pleasant expression never wavered. "Mr. Walker, the board takes these allegations very seriously. Given the circumstances, we're placing you on administrative leave pending the completion of our investigation." The words hit like a physical blow. "You're suspending me?" "It's a precautionary measure." "For how long?" "Until we determine whether disciplinary action is warranted." Ethan stood up. "I want to speak to Arya." "That won't be possible," James Bennett said, his first words since Ethan had entered the room. "You're to have no contact with my niece until this investigation is complete. If you violate that directive, you'll be terminated immediately." "You can't." "I can, and I will." James stood, buttoned his suit jacket. "You should have thought about the consequences before you decided to pursue a relationship with her." He walked out. Ethan stood there, fury and disbelief warring in his chest. "You'll receive formal notification by email within the hour," Corso said, gathering her materials. "Please collect your personal items and leave the building. Your access card will be deactivated at noon." She left. Patricia left. Davidson remained. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, I argued against this." "Not hard enough, apparently." "There's nothing I could have done. Bennett wanted you gone." The board backed him. Ethan grabbed the folder off the table. "These decisions were sound. You know that." "I do, but it doesn't matter." Davidson sighed. "Go home, Ethan. Don't make this worse." Ethan walked back to his office in a daze. The hallways felt too bright, too normal. People went about their work like his entire world wasn't collapsing. He packed his desk, laptop, a few personal items, a framed photo of Sophie. Marcus appeared in the doorway. "I heard," he said. "Word travels fast." "It always does." Marcus stepped inside, closed the door. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." "Have you talked to Arya?" "I'm not allowed to." "Since when do you follow rules you don't agree with?" Ethan almost smiled. Almost. "Since breaking them could cost me my job permanently." "Your job's already gone, man." "Not officially. Not yet." Marcus shook his head. "This is such bullshit." "Yeah. For what it's worth, I know you. You wouldn't compromise your integrity for anyone, not even her." The words meant more than Marcus probably realized. "Thanks. Call me if you need anything. I mean it." He left, and Ethan finished packing in silence. At 11:30, he walked out of the building for what might be the last time. He sat in his car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, staring at his phone. He wanted to call Arya, needed to know what they'd said to her, whether she was okay. But James Bennett's warning echoed in his head. No contact. Finally, he started the car and drove home. The apartment felt too quiet. Sophie was at school, wouldn't be home for hours. Ethan stood in the kitchen, still holding the box of his belongings, and felt the full weight of what had just happened crash down on him. Suspended, investigated, accused of letting his personal life compromise his professional judgment. And the worst part was the tiny voice in the back of his head asking if they were right. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Unknown. "It's Arya. I borrowed someone's phone. Are you okay?" His hands shook as he typed. "Ethan, I'm fine. What did they say to you?" Unknown. "Same thing, probably. Administrative leave, investigation. My uncle won't even look at me." Ethan, "I'm sorry." Unknown. "This isn't your fault." Ethan, "Isn't it?" Unknown. "No, it's mine. I should have been more careful. Should have disclosed earlier. Should have." Ethan, "Stop. We both made choices. We knew the risks." Unknown. "I don't regret it. Any of it." Ethan, "Me neither." Unknown. "What do we do now?" He stared at that question for a long time. Ethan, "I don't know, but we can't talk, not until this is over. If they find out we're in contact." Unknown. "I know." Ethan, "I'll figure something out." Unknown. "Promise?" Ethan, "Promise." The messages stopped. Ethan set the phone down and sat on the couch, head in his hands. He'd survived a failed marriage, rebuilt his life from nothing, learned to be enough for his daughter even when he didn't feel like enough for himself. But this felt different. This felt like losing something before he'd even had a chance to really hold on to it. When Sophie came home that afternoon, she found him still on the couch, box of office supplies on the floor, staring at nothing. "Daddy? Why are you home?" He forced himself to sit up, put on a smile that probably didn't reach his eyes. "I have some time off from work." "Like a vacation?" "Something like that." She dropped her backpack and climbed onto the couch beside him. "Are you sad?" There was no point lying to her. She always knew anyway. "A little bit, yeah." "Is it because of your friend? The one who made cookies with us?" His throat tightened. "How did you... You looked happy when she was here, and now you look sad. So I thought maybe something happened." 5 years old and already reading him like a book. "Something did happen," he admitted, "but it's complicated. Adult stuff." "Is she okay?" "I think so." "Are you going to fix it?" "I'm going to try." Sophie leaned against him, her small weight grounding him in a way nothing else could. "I liked her," she said quietly. "She was nice. And she didn't talk to me like I was a baby. She liked you too." "Do you love her?" The question caught him completely off guard. "Sophie, it's okay if you do. I won't be mad." She looked up at him with those impossibly wise eyes. "Mia says her dad was really sad after her mom left. But then he met his girlfriend and he got happy again. You should be happy again too." Ethan pulled her close, blinking against the sudden burning in his eyes. "You're pretty smart, you know that?" "I know." She giggled. "Can we have mac and cheese for dinner?" Yeah, we can have mac and cheese. She bounced off to her room, crisis apparently averted, leaving Ethan alone with thoughts he didn't know how to organize. Did he love Arya? He didn't know. They hadn't known each other long enough, hadn't been through enough together. But he felt something bigger and more terrifying than anything he'd felt since his wife left. And now he might lose it before he ever had a chance to figure out what it was. The next 3 days were the longest of Ethan's life. No contact from the company, no updates on the investigation, just silence and waiting and the slow torture of not knowing. He couldn't call Arya, couldn't text her, couldn't even check in to see if she was okay. All he had were his thoughts and the growing certainty that he'd screwed everything up. On Friday morning, his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered anyway. Mr. Walker, this is Jennifer Corso. His stomach dropped. What can I do for you? The investigation has concluded. I'd like to meet with you to discuss the findings. Are you available this afternoon? When? 2 o'clock. My office downtown. I'll be there. She gave him the address and hung up. Ethan sat there for a long moment, phone still in his hand. This was it. Either they'd found something that would end his career, or they hadn't. Either way, his life was about to change. He called his sister, asked if she could pick up Sophie from school. Is everything okay? Andrea asked. I'll know in a few hours. Ethan, I'll call you after. Promise. He hung up before she could ask more questions. At 1:30, he put on a suit for the first time since the gala. Checked his reflection in the mirror. He looked tired, worn down, but he looked ready. The office building downtown was sleek glass and steel, the kind of place that cost more per square foot than Ethan's entire apartment. Corso's office was on the 15th floor. Her assistant led him to a conference room, small, private, just a table and 4 chairs. Corso was already there, along with another man Ethan didn't recognize. Mr. Walker, thank you for coming. This is Robert Chen, our forensic accountant. They shook hands. Ethan sat down, every nerve in his body on high alert. Corso opened a folder. We've completed a comprehensive review of all business decisions you made over the past 6 months, with particular focus on projects involving Ms. Bennett. And we found no evidence of financial impropriety, no evidence of deliberate favoritism, no evidence that your decisions resulted in material harm to the company. Ethan exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. However, Corso continued, the timing and pattern of certain approvals do suggest that your personal relationship may have influenced your professional judgment, not in ways that were illegal or even necessarily wrong, but in ways that create the appearance of conflict of interest. So what does that mean? It means the board is prepared to reinstate you, with conditions. What conditions? She slid a document across the table. You'll be transferred to a different division, no direct or indirect oversight of any projects Ms. Bennett works on. Mandatory ethics training, and a formal reprimand in your personnel file. Ethan scanned the document. And if I don't accept these terms? Then your employment with Bennett and Cross is terminated effective immediately. What about Arya? Ms. Bennett? Ms. Bennett is receiving a similar offer. She didn't do anything wrong. Neither did you, technically. But the board has determined that the appearance of impropriety is sufficient to warrant corrective action. Corso's expression softened slightly. You're both good at what you do, Mr. Walker. The board doesn't want to lose that. But they can't have the perception that personal relationships influence business decisions. I'm sure you understand. He did. He hated it, but he did. Can I have time to think about it? You have until Monday morning. He took the document and left. Sat in his car in the parking garage for the second time in a week, staring at papers that represented the path forward. Accept the terms. Keep his job. Keep his stability. Keep everything he'd built for Sophie. But accept that his relationship with Arya had been reduced to a liability, a problem to be managed. His phone buzzed. A text from the same unknown number as before. Unknown. They offered me a deal, transfer, reprimand. I don't know what to do. Ethan. I got the same offer. Unknown. Are you going to take it? Ethan. I don't know. Are you? Unknown. I can't lose this job. My uncle will see it as proof that I never deserved it in the first place. Ethan. So you're taking it? Unknown. I don't have a choice. He wanted to argue. wanted to tell her there was always a choice. But he knew better. Sometimes the choice was between bad and worse. Ethan. Then we take it, both of us. We keep our jobs, we keep our lives intact, unknown. And us? That was the question, wasn't it? Ethan. I don't know. Unknown. That's becoming our answer for everything. Ethan. Yeah. Unknown. I miss you. The words hit him square in the chest. Ethan. I miss you too. Unknown. This isn't fair. Ethan. No, it's not. Unknown. But we're going to survive it anyway. Ethan. Are we? Unknown. We have to. He wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that love, or whatever this was, could survive corporate politics and family pressure and all the forces trying to pull them apart. But he'd believed in permanence before, and it had fallen apart anyway. That weekend, Ethan barely slept. Saturday morning, he took Sophie to the park, pushed her on the swings, helped her across the monkey bars, pretended everything was normal while his mind spun through scenarios and outcomes. "Daddy, you're not paying attention," Sophie complained. "Sorry, sweetheart, what did you say?" "I asked if your friend is coming over again." "I don't know." "Why not?" "Because things are complicated right now." "You always say that when you don't want to explain." She wasn't wrong. Sometimes grown-up problems don't have easy explanations, he tried. "Is it because of work?" "Partly." "That's dumb. Work shouldn't make people sad." Out of the mouths of children. "You're right," he said. "It shouldn't." Sunday evening, after Sophie was in bed, Ethan sat at his kitchen table with the offer letter in front of him. He'd read it a dozen times. The language was clear. The terms were reasonable, all things considered. But signing it felt like giving up, admitting defeat, accepting that the world was right and he was wrong for thinking he could have both a career and a relationship with someone he actually cared about. His phone rang. Aria. Her actual number this time. He answered. "Hey. Hey." Her voice sounded tired, strained. "Are you alone?" "Yeah, Sophie's asleep." "I signed the papers." He closed his eyes. "When?" "An hour ago. I couldn't keep staring at them. I signed them." "Okay. Are you angry?" "No, I'm not angry." "You sound angry." "I'm not. I'm just—" He didn't know what he was. "Tired. I'm tired." "Me too." They sat in silence for a moment, just breathing, existing in the same space even through the phone. "Ethan," Aria said softly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay? Do you regret it? Any of it? Me?" The question deserved more than a quick answer. He thought about the past 2 months, the coffee dates, the late-night conversations, the way she'd looked at him like he was someone worth knowing, the way she'd sat on his apartment floor making cookies with his daughter, the way she'd made him feel like maybe, possibly, he could be whole again. "No," he said finally. "I don't regret you. Even though it's cost us both so much? Even though?" He could hear her exhale. "I don't regret you either," she said. "I want you to know that, no matter what happens next." "What does happen next?" "I don't know. We take the deals, we go back to work, we follow the rules." "And us?" "I don't know that either." Aria said, "I can't ask you to choose me over your job, over your stability, over what's best for Sophie." "You're not asking." "But I want to, and that's not fair." She was right. It wasn't fair. None of this was. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we need to step back, give each other space, figure out if this is actually worth fighting for, or if we're just holding on to something because we're both tired of being alone." The words felt like a knife twisting. "Is that what you think this is?" "I don't know what to think anymore." Her voice broke slightly. "I'm so tired of fighting, Ethan. I'm tired of feeling like I have to choose between my career and my heart. I'm tired of disappointing my uncle. I'm tired of all of it." "Then we stop fighting." "What?" "We stop fighting everyone else and we fight for each other instead." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." "You always say that." "Because it's always true." She laughed, but it sounded like crying. "I have to go," she said. I needed to hear your voice."
Arya, wait! But she'd already hung up. Ethan sat there with the dead phone in his hand and the unsigned papers on the table, and he realized something. He was done letting other people decide what his life should look like, done playing it safe, done choosing fear over possibility. He picked up a pen, and he signed the papers, not because he was giving up,
But because sometimes you had to accept the terms before you could change the game. Monday morning, Ethan walked into Jennifer Corso's office and handed her the signed agreement. Congratulations, Mr. Walker. You'll start in your new position next Monday. Thank you. I trust there won't be any further complications. No, Ethan said. No further complications. He left and drove straight to the Bennett and Cross building. His access card still worked, barely. He took the elevator to the 8th floor and walked to James Bennett's corner office. The assistant tried to stop him. Mr. Bennett isn't taking meetings. He'll take this one. Ethan walked past her and opened the door. James Bennett looked up from his desk, expression darkening. You have 30 seconds before I call security. I need 1 minute, that's all. You have nothing I want to hear. I love your niece. That stopped him. James leaned back in his chair, eyes cold. Excuse me? I love Arya. I didn't mean to. I tried not to, but I do. Ethan stepped closer to the desk. And I know you think I'm wrong for her, that I'm using her or taking advantage or compromising her professionally, but you're wrong. You don't know anything about what's best for her. Neither do you. James stood up. Get out of my office. Not until you hear this. I signed your agreement. I took the transfer. I accepted your terms. But that doesn't change how I feel about her. And it doesn't change the fact that she deserves someone who actually sees her, not as a Bennett, not as a business asset, but as a person. And you think you're that person? I think I want to be. And I think she wants that too. You think a lot of things, Mr. Walker. None of them matter. They matter to her. James walked around the desk until he was standing directly in front of Ethan, close enough that Ethan could see the anger and something else, fear maybe, in his eyes. My niece is brilliant, James said quietly. She's capable of extraordinary things, and I will not let her throw that away for someone who can't give her the life she deserves. With respect, sir, you don't get to decide what life she deserves. She does. She's 26 years old. She doesn't know what she wants. She knows enough to choose for herself. They stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. Finally, James stepped back. You're right, he said. I can't decide for her, but I can make sure she understands the cost of choosing you, the opportunities she'll lose, the doors that will close, the family that will question her judgment. If you love her, you'll let her make that choice anyway. If you love her, you'll walk away and let her build the career she's worked for. And there it was, the impossible choice. Ethan turned and walked toward the door, stopped with his hand on the handle. You asked me once what we were doing, he said without turning around. I told you I didn't know, but I know now. We were trying to build something real in a world that only values what looks good on paper. And maybe that was naive, maybe it was stupid, but it was honest. And I won't apologize for that. He left before James could respond, walked out of the building with no idea what came next. But for the first time in weeks, he felt like he'd actually fought for something. And that had to count for something. Ethan didn't hear from Arya for 3 days. 3 days of silence that felt like 3 years. He went through the motions. Dropped Sophie at school, picked her up, made dinner, read bedtime stories. But his mind was somewhere else entirely. Stuck in that moment in James Bennett's office. Wondering if he'd said too much or not enough. Wondering if fighting for something meant anything when the other person had already decided to let go. On Wednesday evening, he was washing dishes when his phone buzzed. Arya, can we talk? In person? His hands went still in the soapy water. Ethan, when? Arya, tonight? I'm outside. He dried his hands and walked to the window. Her car was parked across the street, headlights off, just sitting there. Ethan, Sophie's still awake. Give me 20 minutes. He got Sophie ready for bed faster than usual, reading only one story instead of the usual 2 despite her protests. But we always read 2, she complained. I know, sweetheart, but I have something I need to take care of tonight. Is it your friend? He paused. Yeah, it is. Is she sad? I think so. Sophie considered this seriously. You should give her a hug. Hugs make people feel better. That's good advice. I know. She snuggled into her pillow, clutching Mr. Whiskers. Tell her I said hi. I will. He kissed her forehead, turned off the light, and left the door cracked open the way she liked it. Then he grabbed his jacket and went outside. Arya was leaning against her car, arms wrapped around herself against the cool evening air. She looked different somehow, smaller, more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. Hey, he said. Hey. They stood there for a moment, neither quite knowing how to start. You want to come in? Ethan asked. Can we just… She gestured vaguely. Walk or something. I've been sitting all day and I need to move. Okay. They started walking, no particular direction, just moving through the quiet neighborhood streets, the occasional porch light casting pools of yellow on the sidewalk. I talked to my uncle, Arya said finally. Ethan's stomach tightened. And? He told me about your conversation. I shouldn't have gone to his office. I was out of line. No, you weren't. She stopped walking, turned to face him. You said everything I've been too scared to say for weeks. What does that mean? It means I've been so worried about what everyone else thinks that I forgot to ask myself what I actually want. She took a breath. And what I want is you, even if it's complicated, even if it costs me. Hope flared in his chest, dangerous and bright. Arya, let me finish, please. She stepped closer. I've spent my entire life trying to prove I deserve to be in rooms I was born into, trying to show I'm more than my last name. And somewhere along the way, I started believing that success meant sacrificing everything else, that wanting a personal life made me weak or unprofessional or not serious enough. You're not any of those things. I know. I'm starting to know. She reached for his hand. When I met you, you were the first person in years who saw me as just me. Not as a Bennett, not as a strategic asset, just Arya. And I didn't realize how much I needed that until I almost lost it. Ethan squeezed her hand. You didn't lose it. I almost did. Because I let fear make my decisions. Fear of disappointing my uncle. Fear of proving everyone right who said I didn't deserve the job. Fear of… Her voice caught. Fear of being happy and having someone take it away again. He understood that fear intimately. So what changed? He asked quietly. You did. You walked into my uncle's office and fought for us when I was too scared to fight for myself. And I realized that I've been so busy protecting myself from getting hurt that I forgot what it feels like to actually live. She looked at him with those clear, honest eyes he'd fallen for in the first place. I don't want to be scared anymore, she said. I want to be with you, publicly, honestly. Whatever that means for my job or my family or anything else. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking. Opening. What about your uncle? He'll get over it, or he won't, but I can't keep living my life based on what he thinks I should want. She smiled, sad and certain at the same time. He told me something after you left. He said you reminded him of himself 30 years ago, before he got so caught up in building an empire that he forgot what it felt like to actually care about something real. He said that? He said you were either the biggest mistake I'd ever make or the best decision, and that it was up to me to figure out which. And I already know. I've known since that first night at the gala. I just needed to stop being afraid of it. Ethan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, feeling her settle against him like she'd always belonged there. I love you, he said into her hair. I should have said it weeks ago, but I was too scared. But I'm saying it now. I love you. She pulled back just enough to look at him, tears shining in her eyes. I love you too. So much it terrifies me. He kissed her, soft and sure and full of all the words they'd been too afraid to say. When they finally pulled apart, Arya was smiling through the tears. Sophie said to tell you hi, Ethan said. She laughed. She did? She also said I should give you a hug because hugs make people feel better. She's wise beyond her years. Don't I know it? They started walking again, hands linked, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan felt like he could actually breathe. So what now? Arya asked. Now we figure it out together. No more hiding, no more trying to manage everyone else's opinions. Your new position starts Monday. Yours too. Different divisions, no overlap. Probably for the best, at least for a while. She nodded. But we make this work, however we need to. Yeah, we do. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the night settling around them. Can I ask you something? Arya said. Always. When did you know that you wanted this, wanted us? Ethan thought about it. Remember that night you came over for dinner when you made cookies with Sophie? The ones that were basically just chocolate chips held together with hope? He smiled. Those ones. I watched you two together, and you didn't try to be someone you weren't. You didn't try to impress me or win her over. You just existed. In my messy kitchen with flour everywhere and a 5-year-old asking you a million questions. And I thought, this is what I've been missing. Not perfection, just someone who fits. I'm not sure I fit anywhere. You fit with us. She stopped walking and kissed him again. Longer this time, like she was trying to memorize the moment. Take me home, she whispered against his mouth. Arya, not like that. I mean, take me to your home. Let me fall asleep on your couch while you finish whatever work you pretend you're not stressed about. Let me wake up to Sophie asking me about unicorns. Let me be part of your actual life, not just the edited version you show the world. Ethan's throat tightened with emotion he didn't quite know how to name. Okay, he said. Yeah, let's go home. The next morning, Ethan woke up on the couch with Arya curled against him and sunlight streaming through the windows. For a moment, he just lay there, listening to her breathe, feeling the weight of her against his side. Real. This was real. The sound of small feet padding across the floor made him look up. Sophie stood in the doorway in her pajamas, clutching Mr. Whiskers, staring at them with wide eyes. Hi, sweetheart, Ethan said softly, trying not to wake Arya. Is she sleeping over? Yeah, is that okay? Sophie thought about this very seriously. Then she nodded and walked over to the couch. You should get a blanket, she whispered loudly. She looks cold. Ethan smiled. Good idea. Sophie disappeared and returned a moment later with her favorite fuzzy blanket, the purple one with stars, and carefully draped it over Arya. The movement woke her. Arya blinked, disoriented for a second, then saw Sophie standing there and smiled. Morning, Arya said, voice rough with sleep. You stayed all night, Sophie observed. I did. Is that okay with you? Uh-huh. Are you hungry? Daddy makes good pancakes. I would love pancakes. Sophie grinned and ran toward the kitchen, already listing all the toppings they had. Arya sat up, running a hand through her messy hair. Well, that was easier than I expected. She likes you. The feeling's mutual. She looked at him, something soft in her expression. This is nice. Waking up here? With you. With her. Yeah, it is. They got up and made breakfast together. Arya helped Sophie set the table while Ethan cooked. It was chaotic and noisy, and Sophie spilled orange juice twice, but it felt more like home than anything Ethan had experienced in years. After breakfast, Arya helped clean up while Sophie colored at the table. I should probably go, Arya said reluctantly. I have some things to take care of before Monday. Okay. But I'll call you later? You better. She kissed him goodbye at the door, quick and sweet with Sophie watching from the living room. Bye, Sophie, Arya called. Bye. Come back soon. I will, promise. After she left, Sophie came over to stand beside Ethan at the door. I like her, Daddy. Me too, sweetheart. Is she your girlfriend now? Yeah, I think she is. Good. You smile more when she's around. Out of the mouths of children. Monday morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. Ethan dropped Sophie at school, drove to the office, and walked into a building that felt both familiar and completely foreign. New division, new desk, new colleagues who didn't know his history or his mistakes. A fresh start. He was setting up his computer when Marcus appeared in the doorway. Heard you got transferred to supply chain optimization. News travels fast. Always does. Marcus leaned against the frame. For what it's worth, I think Davidson's an idiot for not fighting harder to keep you. It's fine. Fresh start might be good. And Bennett? What about her? Did you two? We're together, officially, publicly. Whatever anyone wants to call it. Marcus grinned. Good for you, man. Seriously. Don't let the bastards grind you down. Wasn't planning on it. After Marcus left, Ethan settled into work. The projects were different, but the principles were the same. Logistics, efficiency, making sure things got from point A to point B without falling apart. He could do this. Around noon, his phone buzzed. Arya. How's the new desk? Ethan. Smaller than the old one? Yours? Arya. Same, but the view's better. Ethan. Yeah? Arya. Yeah. I can see the future from here. He smiled. Ethan. Lunch? Arya. Can't. Meeting with my uncle. Wish me luck. Ethan. You don't need luck, but good luck anyway. Arya. I'll text you after. He went back to work, but his mind kept drifting to Arya in that meeting, wondering how it was going, whether James Bennett was making this harder than it needed to be. At 2:30, his phone rang. Arya. Hey, he answered. How'd it go? Better than expected. Can you meet me? When? Now, the park across from the office. I'll be there in 5. He grabbed his jacket and headed out. The park was mostly empty on a Monday afternoon, just a few people on lunch breaks and someone walking a dog. Arya was sitting on a bench near the fountain, face tilted up toward the sun. She smiled when she saw him. That was fast. You sounded like you had news. I do. She patted the bench beside her. Sit. He sat. So, she said, I had a very interesting conversation with my uncle. And? And he apologized. Ethan blinked. He what? Apologized. To me. For trying to control my life, for making me feel like I had to choose between my career and my happiness. For not trusting my judgment. She laughed, but it sounded a little watery. I almost fell out of my chair. What brought that on? You did. Apparently your little speech made him do some thinking. He said you reminded him that he'd built this company because he believed in taking risks on things that mattered, and somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten that people matter more than quarterly reports. He actually said that? Direct quote. I was shocked too. She took Ethan's hand. He wants to meet you, properly, not as the guy dating his niece, as a person. Are you sure that's a good idea? Probably not, but I want you to try. For me. He squeezed her hand. Okay, for you. They sat there for a while, watching the fountain, not needing to fill the silence with words. I'm scared, Arya admitted quietly. Of what? Of this working, of it being real, of having something good and not screwing it up. Me too. But we're doing it anyway. Yeah, we are. She leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Thank you, she said. For what? For being brave when I couldn't be. For fighting when I wanted to run. For showing me what it looks like to actually live instead of just surviving. Ethan kissed the top of her head. You did the same for me. You know that, right? I do now. 2 weeks later, Ethan found himself sitting in an upscale restaurant downtown across from James Bennett. Arya sat beside him, her hand linked with his under the table, solid and reassuring. James ordered wine, made small talk about the weather and traffic, acted like this was a perfectly normal dinner and not the most awkward thing Ethan had experienced in months. Finally, after the appetizers arrived, James set down his fork and looked directly at Ethan. Arya tells me you have a daughter. Yes, sir, Sophie. She's 5. And you're raising her alone. I am. That's not easy. No, it's not. James nodded slowly. I raised Arya's father by myself after my wife passed. She was 3 at the time. Hardest thing I've ever done. Ethan hadn't expected that. I didn't know, he said quietly. Most people don't. I don't talk about it much. James took a sip of wine. But it taught me something. It taught me that the only thing that actually matters is the people you love. Everything else? The money, the success, the empire. It's all just noise if you don't have someone to share it with. Arya squeezed Ethan's hand under the table. I forgot that for a while, James continued. Got so caught up in building something that would last that I forgot to actually live in the present. And when Arya came to work for me, I saw the same thing happening to her. Working all hours, never taking time for herself, trying to prove she belonged. She more than belongs, Ethan said. She's brilliant at what she does.
I know, I've always known, but I wanted everyone else to see it too. Wanted to protect her from people who would dismiss her because of her name. He paused. And then you came along and I saw her actually happy for the first time in years. And instead of being grateful, I tried to take it away. You were protecting her. I was being a controlling fool. James looked at his niece. I'm sorry, Arya, for all of it. You deserve better. Thank you, Arya said softly. That means more than you know. James turned back to Ethan. I'm not going to pretend I understand what she sees in you. You're not what I would have chosen for her, but she's not asking for my approval, and she shouldn't have to. No, sir, she shouldn't. But you should know. If you hurt her, if you take advantage of her trust, if you do anything that makes her doubt herself, I will make your life extremely difficult. Ethan met his eyes steadily. I wouldn't expect anything less. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then James smiled. Actually smiled. You'll do, he said. You'll do just fine. The rest of dinner was easier. They talked about work, about Sophie, about Arya's plans for her division. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it was honest, and that was enough. As they were leaving, James pulled Ethan aside. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For reminding me what actually matters. I needed that. He shook Ethan's hand and left. Arya slipped her arm through Ethan's as they walked to the car. That went better than expected, she said. Your uncle's not as scary as I thought. Liar. He's terrifying. Okay, yeah, he is. She laughed, and the sound filled him with something that felt dangerously close to joy. 3 months later, Ethan stood in his kitchen making dinner, while Sophie did homework at the table, and Arya worked on her laptop on the couch. It had become their routine. Arya came over most evenings after work. Sometimes she stayed the night. Sometimes she didn't. But she was there, present, woven into the fabric of their lives in a way that felt inevitable now. Daddy, I'm stuck on this math problem, Sophie called. Let me see. He wiped his hands and walked over, leaning down to look at her worksheet. What's the problem? I don't understand what it's asking. He explained it slowly, walking her through the steps. From the couch, Arya looked up and smiled at them. You're good at that, she said. At what? Being patient, explaining things without making her feel stupid. She's not stupid, she's 5. I know, but not everyone gets that. She closed her laptop. Can I help with dinner? You can set the table. I can do that. They moved around each other in the small kitchen with practiced ease. Sophie finished her homework and started chattering about her day at school. The spaghetti boiled on the stove. Arya found the plates without having to ask where they were. It was ordinary, domestic, perfect in its imperfection. After dinner, after dishes, after Sophie was in bed, Ethan and Arya collapsed on the couch together. I'm exhausted, Arya said, resting her head on his shoulder. Long day? Long week, but good. Yeah, good. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Arya said, I've been thinking about something. What's that? About getting my own place closer to here. My apartment's too far. The commute's killing me. Ethan's heart did something complicated. Or, she continued, and this is just a thought, so don't freak out. I could just stay here, officially, like, move in. He pulled back to look at her. Are you serious? I don't know, maybe? Is that crazy? It's fast. I know. Sophie would have questions. I know that too. And we'd have to figure out logistics, space, how to make it actually work. Right, all of that. He looked at her, really looked at her. But you want to. I do, I really do. She took his hand. I love you. I love Sophie. I love being here, and I'm tired of leaving every night when all I want is to stay. Ethan felt something settle in his chest. Not fear this time. Not doubt. Certainty. Okay, he said. Okay? Yeah, let's do it. Move in. Be a family. Figure it out as we go. Arya's face broke into the biggest smile he'd ever seen. Really? Really? She kissed him, and he pulled her close, and somewhere in the back of his mind he realized this was what happiness felt like. Not perfect, not without complications, but real. The next morning, over breakfast, they told Sophie. She took the news with the seriousness it deserved. So Arya's going to live here? Like, all the time?
Yeah, Ethan said. Is that okay with you? Sophie looked at Arya. Will you help me with my art projects? Absolutely. And read me stories? Whenever you want. And make cookies even when they get burned? Arya laughed. Especially then. Sophie nodded, satisfied. Okay, you can stay. Just like that, it was settled. Over the next few weeks, Arya moved in piece by piece. Books filled the empty shelves. Her clothes appeared in the closet. Her coffee mug took up permanent residence in the kitchen. It wasn't seamless. They argued about whose turn it was to do dishes, about how to organize the bathroom, about whether Sophie needed a nightlight or not. But they figured it out. They learned each other's rhythms, made space for each other's quirks, built something that belonged to all three of them. One Saturday morning, Ethan woke up to the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. He wandered out to find Arya and Sophie making pancakes, or trying to. There was batter on the counter, flour in Sophie's hair, and both of them were giggling over some joke he'd missed. Arya looked up and saw him standing there. Morning, sleepyhead. Morning. We're making breakfast. Want some? Sure. He sat down at the table and watched them work together. Sophie, standing on a stool, carefully pouring batter into the pan. Arya guiding her hands, patient and gentle. And in that moment, Ethan understood something he'd been too afraid to believe for a long time. This was his family now, not the one he'd planned for, not the one he thought he'd have, but the one he'd built from broken pieces and second chances. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, Ethan and Arya sat on the couch with glasses of wine and the comfortable silence of people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. Can I tell you something? Ethan said. Always. I used to think love was supposed to be easy, that if you had to fight for it, that meant it wasn't real. That real love just happened and happened without any effort. And now I think that's bullshit. Love is work. It's choosing the same person every day, even when it's hard. It's fighting through the messy parts and coming out the other side still holding hands. Arya set down her wine and turned to face him. Is that what we're doing? She asked. Choosing each other every day? Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. Good, because I plan on choosing you for a very long time. He kissed her, soft and sure. I love you, he said. I love you too. And sitting there in the apartment that had become their home, with his daughter asleep down the hall and the woman he loved beside him, Ethan finally let go of the fear that had lived in his chest for years. Let go of the belief that happiness was temporary. Let go of the need to control everything, because some things couldn't be controlled. Some things just had to be trusted. And trust, he was learning, was the bravest thing of all. Here's what I learned from watching my own life fall apart and rebuild itself into something I never expected. Love doesn't ask permission. It shows up when you're not ready and demands you make room for it anyway. And you can spend your whole life building walls to keep it out, convincing yourself that safety is the same thing as living. But it's not. Safety is just another word for surviving. And somewhere along the way, we all have to decide if we want to survive or actually live. The truth is, there are no guarantees, no promises that can't be broken, no certainties in a world built on fragile human hearts. You can do everything right and still lose. You can be careful and cautious and still get hurt. But you can also take the risk. Open the door. Let someone see you, all of you, the messy parts and the scared parts, and the parts you've spent years hiding. And maybe it won't work out. Maybe it will fall apart. Or maybe, just maybe, it will be the best decision you ever make. Not because it's easy, not because it's safe, but because it's real. And real is always worth fighting for.